Hey guys, we've recently partnered with the social media platform Go Wild to combat mainstream social media censorship. If you're tired of having your hunting and outdoor posts taken down and flagged, be sure to check out Go Wild, which was built by outdoorsmen and women just like you. Go Wild is a free social community. Not only are your photos not censored, but they are also encouraged on Go Wild. Go Wild gives you points for things like sharing your trophies, gear reviews, and inviting friends. As you earn more points, you unlock awesome rewards such as gift cards, free swag, knives, and huge discounts on brands like Garmin and Vortex. Oh, and if you create a free account, you can unlock $10 just for trying it out. Use code HTW to receive 10% off your order today. Download Go Wild at gowild.com or in the App Store.
To hunt the wild, to hunt the wild, gonna hunt the wild.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Hunt the Wild podcast. I'm your host, Adam Bowlds. Today I'm joined with Nate Santoro. He's a Pennsylvania native, I believe. You're born and raised in Pennsylvania?
Yep.
Yeah, how you doing, man?
Doing pretty good. Excited.
Could you introduce and tell everybody a little bit about yourself and how you got started in hunting and the outdoors?
Sure. Yeah, I'm a PA native. I'm from Eastern PA originally. Now I live closer to Western PA. I've been fishing pretty much since I could hold a fishing rod, and I've been hunting for about probably 12 years now, I think, and love it. Love every second of it. It consumes my life. Some people say it's too much, but I don't think there's ever enough. But yeah, I love the deer hunt. Pretty much I love to hunt for anything and fish for anything. It's anytime I'm out in the woods, it's where I'm at.
I don't think you'll have any issues with people saying it's too much here on this show because they come
Definitely.
here to consume all the hunting content. But
Right.
we're gonna do an episode all about shed hunting because it's getting that time of year, and you may need some refreshing tips and tricks. And Nate's real big into it, so I'm hoping maybe he's gonna give you some info, maybe one little piece that might just put the puzzle together for you to find some sheds because. I shed hunt a little bit, and I'm not super good at it, but maybe Nate's tricks here will put me on some more sheds. So can you kind of explain to everybody, because I feel like there might be some people on here that listen that don't totally consume their lives with deer hunting and shed hunting and stuff. We may have fishermen or people that are just into picking mushrooms and they're not really familiar with it. So just tell everybody kind of what shed hunting is and kind of explain it.
Yeah, right about this time of year, as most people know, the bucks lose their antlers, and a bunch of us people we like to wander around in the woods and look for them, and spend a lot of time looking for them, and go out. And sometimes it's easy, and then there's some days you walk 20 miles and you don't find one, but it's certainly fun. But
can you tell people why deer actually shed their antlers? I was actually having this conversation with my wife yesterday. Actually on Saturday, we went out, pulled a couple cameras and kind of looking for some sheds along the way. And she's kind of like, why do they shed their antlers? What's really the point? So I'm going to have you dive into that. Why don't they just keep their antlers all year round?
right, yeah, I'm not a deer biologist, but to my understanding, it mostly has to do with testosterone. Come October, November, December, the bucks are in the rut. It's breeding season, and then once we enter into the winter, they're pretty much beat down from the rut. They're at the worst shape of their entire life. Their testosterone's at all-time low, and that pretty much triggers their antlers to fall off because a lot of their antler growth is fueled by testosterone. And when their testosterone levels dip in the winter, they shed their antlers, and then once the weather warms up, they'll start getting into velvet and start regrowing their antlers. And antlers are crazy. It's one of the fastest growing, animal substances known to man on the planet. They can grow a couple inches a day, and it's awesome.
Yeah. Do you, I know you said you're not a deer biologist, and neither am I by any means, but I don't think I actually know, why deer have velvet on their antlers? Is it just because it grew and it's fresh? Is there any kind of scientific reason why they need velvet on their antlers? Do you know?
I believe it's like a soft tissue, like a skin outside of their antlers, and that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of the. Now again, I might be butchering this here, but to my knowledge, that's like the vessel that brings nutrients into the antlers, and it's like a soft tissue that pumps blood and pumps nutrients, and I know a lot of it's calcium going into their antlers, and then once their testosterone levels start to peak towards the end of summer, that it like calcifies, and then that velvet, that's when it sheds. But I believe a lot of it has to do with blood flow and nutrient flow. Because like if you see on deer's antlers, there's like those little squiggles. Those are actually from like blood vessels going up in there.
Okay. Yeah. So like I said, there might be some people on here that don't know. Once deer shed their antlers, they go, a couple months without having antlers. And in the summertime, they start to grow back. And when they grow back, they have velvet, just kind of like just like it sounds, a velvet or a felt film per se on the outside. And then as the fall rolls in and their testosterone's rise for the rut or for breeding season, they start to rub that stuff off. And we love when they rub that stuff off because then we can find them. Unless you're hunting velvet deer, then you might not like when they rub it off.
Right.
So explain a little bit how you or why you started hunting for sheds or how you got involved in that.
Definitely. So growing up back home at my grandparents' house, they have like a couple 100-acre woodlot. I guess it's public land behind their house. And my grandparents would walk it pretty often. And I remember the one year they had found a shed, and they weren't hunters, but they had this shed. And when I was little, I would always, every time I went to their house, I was like enamored with this big, cool bone, like this antler. And I'd look at it every time I went over. And the one time when I was probably, I don't know, 10, 11, I was over at their place and messing around in the woods behind their house and stumbled up into this big deer bed. And here there was a shed laying right in the middle of it. And I'd found my first shed and I was like so excited about it. And that lit this fire in me. And since then I've shed hunted every single year. And it's been I almost like it more than deer hunting, as crazy as it sounds.
So you started actually shed hunting prior to deer hunting, right?
Yep. I found my first shed before I ever killed my first deer.
Yeah, I feel like nowadays, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but a lot of the times people are shed hunting to find deer, to see who survived, to kind of seems like you just kind of went after it just because you thought they were cool.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I was always into hunting, and I mean, I had hunted before I found my first shed, but that was one of the big reasons that fueled it. Is I just thought, and still to this day, I just think deer antlers are so cool.
Were you aware of why deer shed their antlers like that when you were a kid, you think, or?
I knew they shed them, but I didn't really know the science behind it. But
Yeah. So what are the reasons that people shed hunt, and do you think people shed hunt for different reasons? We kind of answered that a little bit maybe, but
I'd say for me, it's definitely, and I know a lot of other people, it's just because, I mean, if I gave you a tour of my apartment, there's sheds all over the place. I love them. I think they look cool. I just like that. For me, it's like people collect, whatever people collect. I collect sheds. And I know there are people, I know that you had mentioned this as a later question, but there's people that sell them. But I think a lot of people too, like you just mentioned, they use it as a tool. It's a way to go out and learn the woods and learn what deer are in those woods. And, it started for me as picking up cool antlers, but that's definitely developed into what I'm after, is learning the woods and learning the deer.
Yeah. Also, for anybody that doesn't know, a lot of deer hunters, me, but I'm not so good at it, try to go out after season and check these bedding areas and food sources and see if they can maybe find a deer that they were trying to kill all year. And usually if you find it sheds, it means that it's made it on till the next season. So you won't have to get so far down in the dumps and have to wonder if he got hit by a car, if somebody else shot him,
right.
If he ran to another county for some reason. So it's just kind of a foolproof proof way, I guess, to make sure that they made it through. Now, that doesn't mean to say that they don't shed their antlers and then get hit by a semi the next day, because I'm sure that happens. But yeah, it's definitely cool to get around and find them. So when you go out shed hunting, if you're getting ready to gear up and go, you're at your apartment, what kind of gear are you taking with you? And like bag, binoculars, what's it look like that you're packing in the woods?
So for me, the biggest thing, you know, I have a little backpack that I bring. It's like my messing around the woods backpack. The biggest thing is normally when I go out shed hunting, it's just probably going to be an all-day affair. And if I'm walking around the woods all day, you're burning a lot of energy. It's physically and mentally taxing. I bring food, and I bring a lot of snacks, and I bring plenty of water to keep myself fueled, keep myself hydrated, ready to go. And the big thing, you had mentioned binoculars. I didn't do that previously, and lately it's saved my life. I do not step in the woods without my binoculars, especially shed hunting. I mean, I'm sure you know how many times you've been out shed hunting and you look up 50 yards and you see something white sticking up. It's like, is it a shed? I don't know. Before I, walk 50 yards out of my way to go look at whatever it was, and 99% of the time it's a stick. Now I could pull up and glass it and go, okay, it's a stick. Or every once in a while, it's like, holy crap, that's a shed. So binoculars are definitely key.
Yeah, that's something that I do a lot. And some things that I've wondered about too is sometimes you may look over 50 yards, 100 yards out in a field, and you might be like, oh, that's a stubble of corn stalk. But I've wondered how many sheds I've missed doing that. Like,
hundreds.
If I would have went to that extra 50 yards, maybe I would have glassed up another one that was like 50 yards away, like around the curve or something. But yeah, I definitely like to keep binoculars like right on my chest when I shed hunt, because it does save you a lot of time and a lot of energy. And when you're shed hunting, you're putting in a lot of miles.
Yeah.
So how many how many miles you usually put in? Do you kind of stick with like 5 miles a day, or does it just depend on maybe the area you're hunting?
I'd say it definitely depends on the area. I mean, I've had days that I've walked 5 miles. I've had days I've walked. I think my longest shed hunt, was about 14 miles. Some of my buddies have gone over 20 before. Normally I go on and I have a bunch of spots that I want to hit, and I just kind of haul ass and cover as much ground as I can, which is, good and bad, because you want to make sure you're taking your time to really look. You had just mentioned previously about looking, 50 yards away and looking at stuff in the distance. And I've kicked myself a lot of times, because so many times I'm looking way off, out yonder, and then I just glance down and there's a shed that I'm practically about to step on. And that makes me wonder, man, I spend so much time looking far off. How many sheds have I walked by, 2-3 feet away, that I wasn't looking at the ground in front of my feet?
Yeah, it's funny too when you're walking those long periods of time by yourself, you get distracted and you start looking at other things. And sometimes you forget, like, I told my wife the other day, I was like, keep your eyes open for a shed like a mile in when we're pulling some cameras. And she's like, I just totally forgot we're shed hunting. It's like, I wonder how many we walked past.
Yeah.
How many people do you usually take with you? Is this something you do solo, or do you ever take a extra set of eyes?
I would say probably 98% of the time I'm solo, partially because I'm greedy and I like to have all the sheds to myself. But every so often I take my girlfriend, or I go with a buddy, and it's nice to have somebody along to keep you sane, because when you're walking 15 miles a day, zigzagging through the woods, sometimes you get a little loopy.
Yeah. It'd be nice to take somebody shed hunting with you that just likes to be outdoors but doesn't care about the sheds, because then you can take the whole haul home with you.
Right. Right.
So you don't have a dog that you shed hunt with, do you?
Nope.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't use a dog. I mean, I think that's really cool. If you can train a dog to find a shed, that's pretty awesome. I mean, I think it's cheating. I think your dog should get to keep all the sheds, but personally, no, I don't use a dog.
Yeah, I was going to ask you why, since you've been into it for so long and it wasn't just something that you just picked up last year, maybe you hadn't gotten to that point, but you've been in the game for a while. I was going to ask you why you didn't have a dog, but you just like the chase. You like being the dog yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I've never even owned a dog, but yeah, I like just going out and finding them myself.
So shed hunting is very important when it comes to time. Can you kind of talk about when the right time is to shed hunt and how you kind of figure out the best time to shed hunt? And it's kind of a three-part question, but is it region specific, as in, do they drop the same time in Indiana as they do PA or out west?
I found, at least from what I know and the people I've talked to, it seems for the most part it is pretty much consistent that like right about now, like end of February, early March is like the best time to be out there. It has a lot to do with, the how the rut goes, what the specific deer you have. I mean, I know there was a bunch of guys I know finding, the one dude I know, he found 15 sheds before the end of December. And
Yeah.
around me, I still have bucks that are holding. So it could be state by state. There's different parts of different areas that it's just how the weather is, how the deer are, how the rut was, how their nutrition is. It can be totally region specific. But I always end up going out real early because I just get sick of sitting at home and I want to go walk in the woods. But I find even going out in December can be a great tool because I kind of like to scout for shed hunting. I like to go out and see not what the deer were doing in October and November, but what are the deer doing on their winter pattern. So sometimes it's helpful to go out early, kind of figure out where the deer are. And then once you get towards March or the end of February to go out again and really start hammering looking for sheds.
Yeah, I've seen YouTube videos and different stuff where people will shoot a buck late and they'll be dragging it out. Maybe them and a buddy, and they'll each be holding on to one antler, and all of a sudden one of them pops off. But yeah, you see trail cam pictures all the time in February that deer are still holding. So I think a lot of it has to do with, like you said, it has to do with weather and rut, and seems like there's a million factors in every woods, and it can be different even just a mile up the road. So just for anybody that maybe is not very familiar with shed hunting, why is it so important not to shed hunt early, and why is it super important not to shed hunt too late?
Well, the big thing with going early that you're kind of rolling the dice with is obviously probably most of those deer still have their antlers. And, they've just been chased around for what, 3 months, 4 months getting shot at. They're still on edge. And if you're going out, they get on their winter pattern and you're going and, bumping them all over the place, they'll move. And, I've seen it before that, deer were, just, at the end of December, there was places that there was deer everywhere. And I've been in there this week and last week, and I couldn't even see a deer track in the snow. So you go out too early, you can bump them, and they'll, if they think there's somebody pressuring them in there, they're going to leave and go somewhere else. So that's the big problem with going too early. Now going late, obviously you have a lot of other dudes out. There's other guys out there picking up sheds, and also you have squirrels that are going to chew on them. And I don't know about where you are in Indiana if you have porcupines, but here we have a bunch of porcupines, and they'll practically eat a shed.
Really?
They'll chew it until there's literally just nothing left.
Huh.
So I've found some sheds that it's literally like just a little tiny sliver of an antler because a porcupine's eating all of it. So the longer they sit there on the ground, the more prone they are to getting chewed and bleached and covered up in leaves. So it's a timing thing.
Do you ever shed hunt an area, like you said you were out prior to shed season, we'll put in quotes.
Right.
Do you ever walk an area and then maybe a couple weeks later maybe do the same walk again?
Yep, I've done that plenty of times. Last year, a lot of I had my best shed year ever last year, and a lot of the places that I found the most sheds, I spent time in early January, end of December, early January, and kind of figured out like, okay, this is where the deer are. I'm going to come back here once they start dropping their antlers. And that's what I did. And I did, I've done a walk in January and didn't find anything, and did the exact same walk practically in March and found, 5-6 sheds in one day.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of walking involved and a lot of retracking. Do you use any kind of like Onyx or anything? Do you ever mark down your like, you know how it does your tracker or
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah, it's really interesting when you get done, maybe you get back to the truck or something and you zoom out and you can see all the crazy
Mhm.
zigzags and yeah. Um, so let's talk a little bit about the best places to shed hunt on a property and kind of how you narrow it down if you're on, I don't know, a big piece of property. I know one piece of property I hunt in Kentucky is 12,000 acres.
Yep.
Obviously, I can't walk all that in shed season. So how do I narrow it down and find where these bucks are dropping at?
Right. I mean, where I'm at, I'm on public land in Allegheny National Forest here, and it's over 100,000 acres. So it's really important. There's no way you could cover every inch of it. So you have to figure, where those deer are now. And a lot of the times that's not where they were in November or December. So what you have to think about is it's winter and those deer are struggling. And not only, they've just gone through hunting season, they've gone through the rut, they're worn down. Their biggest thing is going to be food and staying warm. So for me, and a lot of other people, almost any good shed hunter you ask, the biggest thing they're going to talk about is south facing exposure. And this time of year in the winter, the sun is going to rise kind of in the southeast and it's going to set in the southwest. So any little area, for me, we have, in PA, we're very mountainous. So that's big south facing mountainside. But, out your way, it might be just a little hump in an ag field that gets more sun than everywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So those south facing slopes, it's going to have sun exposure all day long. It's going to be the first place for the snow to melt, and the deer, they're just going to be in the sun. They're going to be warm. So you can narrow down, you can pretty much cut out anything that's north facing because a lot of times the deer just aren't there in the winter.
Okay.
So I focus in almost solely on south facing stuff. And once you get into that south facing, find the food sources because those deer are not going to be traveling far from food this time of year.
Okay. So they're going to be going bedding or, south facing bedding down to the food and then straight back in the morning, pretty much. So they're pretty patternable, you would say,
Yep.
similar to what they are in the summertime, early September.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing too is, at least where I am, a lot of the times those deer, if they find a good warm hillside, they don't leave. They bed in the same place they eat. They literally will bed there all day long. They'll get up and feed, and then they'll stay in the same little area and pretty much feed. They might not leave a football size area for a week.
Is
or
it
field size area? Sorry.
Is it very common for you to jump deer when you find a shed or right before you find a shed? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's, people call it like yarding up, that the deer will herd up and hang out in one tiny little area. I mean, a lot of the places where I'm at, we don't really have great, it's just pretty much all browse. I mean, they don't really have a really heavy food source, but you'll get areas that, the size of a football field that the ground is just all dug up and pawed up, and you walk in there and jump up a whole herd of deer. There's beds everywhere. There's feeding everywhere. It's kind of they just hang out in one spot a lot of times.
Are you very familiar or are you very good at telling the difference between a buck bed and a doe bed? Because I'm no expert whatsoever. Is that something that you really try to target? Are the does and the bucks bedding together at this time?
A lot of times it's depends on the specific group of deer that you're looking at, but it seems to me that normally if a food source is the banging food source in that area, they'll be together. The bucks might stay a little bit off from those does just because that's how they are, especially the older ones. They kind of want to be loners. They want to be left alone. But I don't know. I'm not the best at telling either, but it seems to me that a lot of times you'll find a big group of does and then somewhere pretty close by there'll be a couple bucks hanging out. But it's sometimes it's regions, area specific. It might be one mountain they're there and the bucks and does are together, and the next mountain they're not.
When you're checking these slopes and or mountains or whatever the south sides, are you looking for any kind of terrain features when you're on that? Because I imagine if you have like a big like here, it's probably more of a small hill, but if you had like a mountain, it might be kind of a long stretch to work up and down.
Mm-hmm.
Are you looking for like any kind of cedar trees that they may be bedded up against, or any kind of talk about maybe what they would bed in specifically.
So one thing that I love, and now we don't have cedars here in PA, but we have hemlock.
Okay.
And, you know, same thing. It's a conifer, it's an evergreen. If you will find, you know, good, you know, south facing hillside, if you, let's say there's a dozen hemlocks on that hillside, every single hemlock will have a bed or two under it. Mm-hmm. And I've found so many sheds just walking from pine tree to pine tree to pine tree, because they have that, especially where we are, we get a lot of snow. That thick conifer, that gives them cover from the snow. That snow will be way shallower under the pine tree. They'll bed under there, and they spend a lot of time under those. So that's always a great place to look. And another thing too, on those big ridges, if you get some kind of little bench or a flat spot where they're not, you know, pretending to be a mountain goat walking where you slip a little bit and you're going to roll down the hill. If you find a little flat spot or a spot where a tree's falling down and makes that little, you know, depression there, those are a great place where they hang out in bed.
Do you ever play around with elevations? Have you seen any trends in elevations? Maybe they're higher up, or they tend to be more lower, or has anything like that ever come into play?
It depends. I think honestly it's where the sun is and where the food is. Okay. If the sunniest spot is, you know, at the bottom of the mountain, which it normally isn't, that's where they're going to be. If the sunniest spot's at the top of the mountain, that's normally they're going to be in. But you have to consider wind too. If the top of that mountain's getting blasted by wind, they're going to freeze up there. They're not going to like that. But I think it's just a lot. You have to just kind of go out and figure it out and look for where that is. I would say generally kind of in the middle. Sometimes they're at the top of the ridges. Sometimes they're a little bit more in the middle where they're off the break, where they're not getting blasted by wind. But
so kind of a strategic thing when you're maybe working like a slope or like a mountainside or a hill or something. Do you like to just track all the way up it real fast and then work down real slow? Or do you work up it real slow and then maybe work back down another section you didn't walk up and kind of go at it that way? Does it matter if you're looking up, I guess, or looking down? Have you seen any, does it help you in any other way to look down instead of up or down or anything like that?
I think it depends on the day. Depends on what you know, if you have a really bright sunny day and there's a lot of glare, sometimes looking down, you know, or maybe looking up, I don't know. It depends on how the glare is. You kind of have to position yourself at the way that, you know, you're going to get the best field of view. Typically, unless I get distracted, which sometimes I do, and then I wander off, typically I'll try to make my way to the top and look down. But sometimes it is super nice if you're, you know, can stop and look up the hill. You know, sometimes if there's a shed laying up there, it sticks out like a sore thumb when you're looking up at it compared to down. But then the other thing you have to consider when you're looking up is, you know, if there's a log or a little depression and there's a shed on the other side of it, you're never going to see that. So typically I try to make my way to the top and then look down and work my way down and kind of zigzag my way down so I don't have to climb the whole way up that I'm shed hunting.
I saw you post a picture maybe on your story or something earlier about a deer looking for. Did you have a picture on your Instagram earlier?
Yeah, I found I checked the camera today and I had a buck that had no antlers. So
let me ask you this. Two things. One, how often do you use trail cameras, and kind of how do you use those to your advantage to see if a deer is dropped? Are you're putting them in specific areas, I imagine? Are you putting them over a food source or a bed? Or
yeah, I typically, now I'm getting more into the whole trail camera game's kind of new to me, and I've really gotten into that more this year. But what I've been doing recently is I'm finding just areas that I know a large volume of deer are feeding, or just wherever they're spending their time. And it seems, again, like I mentioned earlier, from what I've been seeing the last couple of weeks, is they're bedding and feeding in almost the same areas. Like they're hanging out in a very centralized location. So I keep a couple cameras in my backpack, and I've just been slapping them up where, you know, wherever the sign is the best and there's the most deer sign, I've been slapping a camera up and then, you know, just check it just to see, like, are there any bucks in here? Are there any bucks still holding? Are there any obvious shed bucks? Like the one I had today, it was, a big bodied deer with a big flat head and had two big white circles there where the antlers were. So now I know that's an area I have to go back to look.
Let's talk a little bit about that. So you're running a trail camera and you look up and there's a doe on there and you're like, is that a doe or was that a buck?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the only way really for you to tell as you see those little kind of like nubs on the top of their head, or is there any other traits that you're looking for? Just body size maybe?
Yeah, I mean, typically with a buck, they're going to have big shoulders, they're going to have a big ass, and they're have a big belly and a big, bigger neck. They're built different. Their head, the bucks just have that distinctive head shape where they have, a big flat top on their head. Normally you could see the lumps where just from a distance even, you can see the lumps where the antlers were. And you could kind of just tell the way they walk, the way they run, the way they stand. It's a kind of, you put a woman and a man standing next to each other, a human, you can tell right away, the man has big shoulders, they have big hands, they have big arms. You can tell by looking at a buck, they're built like a man, they're built different. And it's kind of, once you look at enough deer, it gets pretty easy to tell.
Are you, I know you said you're new to the trail camera game, so maybe you haven't experienced this yet, but have you ever been after a deer and you didn't kill him or whatever, and then he shows up on camera, but he's missing his headgear, and you're like, that's him?
I haven't gotten that advanced yet. This is my first winter running them, but I haven't had any shed bucks that I really was able to recognize right away. But hopefully here, I have probably about 6 or 7 cameras out that I need to check, and then areas where I have some bucks that I know they survived. So I'm really excited to go in there and check those this week and see if I can identify if they're in there still.
Now, do you think that's something you're going to be able to tell ever by the body whenever he sheds his headgear? Or you think it's just something you'll maybe have to experience and you'll be like, that's him. I just know it's him.
Right. I'm the one buck in particular that I'm really interested in finding his sheds. I have his sheds from last year sitting on the floor next to me.
Oh, let's see him.
He has
hold him up.
Yeah, he has.
Anybody watching on YouTube, sorry if you're on Apple or Spotify, you won't get to see him. But yeah,
he has this really distinct.
Oh yeah,
hook
that's very
brow.
cool.
Yeah, I found his sheds in October this year. Actually, I didn't find him last spring. I found him in October, and as you saw, they're in pretty much perfect condition.
You got lucky.
Yeah, they were totally buried in leaves. I found a big scrape about maybe 80 yards from where I found those sheds, and he is on that scrape all the time. He is just he's hanging out in that specific area, and he was in there. I think I checked that camera last in the beginning of January, and he was in there a couple times. So I'm excited. I think if I would see him without antlers, I think I'd recognize him.
You think? What do you think his antlers are going to look like this year? You've seen him on camera, I guess.
He actually shrunk from last compared. I scored those sheds, giving him guessing about an 18-inch spread. He was about 130. This year, he's shrunk his mass. He's lost a lot of mass, and he lost the brow tine. He still has the hook brow, but the other brow, he doesn't have any brow tine. So I think he looks a little scrawny, so I don't know if he was injured or something, but I think he lost some antler size this year. Now next year he might be bigger, but
you think is he an old buck? Is he on the decline, or maybe he just got sick?
I think he's pretty old, but I don't know. Sometimes those bucks, if let's say he got hit in deer season, the year that I have his sheds from, that year, a lot of times if you see a buck get injured, his, more energy is going to be going to that injury that he has than to antler growth. So sometimes you might have an injured buck might have a smaller rack that following year.
Okay. So I wanted to kind of talk about the trail camera thing. I know you're new, so maybe you'll just know this without maybe capturing it on trail camera. When a buck sheds his antlers, is that something that generally just pops off of his head, or are they rubbing and trying to maybe work those off like they are trying to shed their velvet when they start rubbing in pre-rut October-ish?
Right. Now, I haven't seen it personally, obviously, because I don't have a million trail cameras out like some people. But I mean, I've seen videos of bucks losing their antlers, and it normally seems to be, it seems like it scares the crap out of them. I don't think they really do it intentionally. A lot of
Mhm.
times, I think it's just that's a big reason I key in on food sources is a lot of times they have their head down, they have their head in the brush and in the leaves and in the snow. And I think just the motion of them picking their head up and down and putting it in the dirt, that's just what makes those antlers fall off. And if you
It
see a video of them falling off, it seems like they're mighty scared by it.
It makes you kind of wonder. I remember back, when I was a little kid and I'd get a loose tooth, you can feel it loose and wiggle around. It kind of makes you wonder if they can kind of feel it jangling, like it's getting ready to come off, or that something's funny.
Yeah.
Also, like I sometimes my hair grows long and I'll get my head shaved and it'll just like feel like my head's super lighter. So I bet they're real happy when those antlers come off. They probably feel like they can navigate just about through anything, because
especially those big ones,
as you know, going through vines and some of that stuff that they live in, it's got to get hectic to fight that stuff all the
definitely
time. So do a lot of deer get hit in Pennsylvania? Do you ever see a lot of bucks on the side of the road? Are you one of those guys that's like, I know you like sheds and all that stuff, are you one of those guys that's like, I gotta have that antler, and you're like stopping on the side of the road and sawing it off? Or
no,
is it just not the same fix for you?
No. Technically, in Pennsylvania, it's illegal unless you get a salvage permit. You're not allowed to pick up dead heads or dead deer. But I don't know. For me, I like knowing that deer is still alive and that I found him. He shed his antlers as part of his day-to-day routine, and I found it. But man, there's been a couple times going down the highway that I've seen a deer, and I've been took every ounce of strength in my body not to pull over.
Yeah.
But I think Pennsylvania, I mean, might be wrong here. I think we have one of the highest rates of deer vehicle collisions out of any state.
Wow.
It's
that'd be interesting to see the comparison of that to Indiana, because we sure get a lot of them here too.
Yep.
I see a lot of deer hit, and I driving to work or whatever, and you'll always see that they don't even just really cut the antlers off. They usually cut the whole head off.
Yep.
And I've always kind of wondered people's reasoning behind that. Like, are they cutting it out and trying to tell their buddies that they shot it?
Yeah.
But yeah, we have the salvage thing here too. You can't take a dead head actually, or anything other than like a shed antler without a salvage tag. But people definitely do it. I remember driving on the highway one time, and I saw a massive buck get hit by a semi, and I was like, man, I'm not going to pick it up, but I'd like to go see it. And I went down to the next road and turned around and made my loop back to go back southbound on the highway. Somebody had already cut the head off of it within 5 minutes. I'm like, wow, that was, I don't know if people carry sawzalls or something, but that's super fast.
That's how it is in PA too, man. You see a buck, I've seen plenty of times I'm driving wherever I'm going and you see a buck hit on the side of the road and you come back an hour later. It's rare that they last long. People, you see just headless deer on the side of the road. It's like, oh, that was a buck.
So let's talk a little bit about new sheds being shed off compared to maybe ones that have been dropped for a month or two. So new sheds usually are almost bloody or pink or red. I'm colorblind, so I can't really tell on the ends, right? How long do you think that kind of lasts before they start to maybe turn like that whitish color? You know what I'm talking about? Like right where the stick comes off. How long do they stay red for or bloody? Do you know?
Not long.
Yeah.
I think it could be a matter of just a couple. I've never found a shed that had blood on it.
Yeah.
Out of all the sheds I found, they've all been, I think it's within a week, you get rain or that snow melting, it washes that blood right off.
Yeah. It kind of makes you wonder if that hurts the deer when it pops off, if he kind of feels like he's got a, maybe like an eraser burn or something like that.
Yeah.
So, online scouting, I know you said you use some kind of online stuff maybe for deer hunting and stuff. Do you use that kind of stuff for shed hunting? Like e-scouting, mark trails maybe that you've already been down, or maybe ones that you want to recheck? Kind of talk a little bit about how you maybe lay it out and what you mark and what you look for.
Definitely. I mean, you mentioned Onyx before. I pretty much live on that app.
Mm-hmm.
I use it pretty much the whole time. I'll spend hours sitting on my couch. You know, for us here where I'm at in PA, you know, a lot of the food sources I tend to look on are like clear cuts on like a south facing slope, just because that tends to be open and there's a lot of saplings and places that deer can browse and feed. So I'll go on and pretty much, at least I can say within a 30-minute drive of where I live, I pretty much have every south facing slope and every south facing clear cut marked. And I'll use like on Onyx, I'll use for sheds. If I'm, you know, a place I want to shed hunt, I'll make a white pin. And I have all kinds of white pins all over the place that I want to shed hunt. And then when I go in there, I use, as you mentioned before, the tracker. I use that to monitor not only how far I've been walking, but where I've been walking. And if it's like, oh, I've missed this tiny little spot, then I can go back later on in the day and zigzag through there. So I think I mean, I personally use OnX. I know there's a lot of other apps now, but I think that's invaluable. I think that's great. It's an amazing way to learn the woods and hunting, shed hunting, whatever. I think it's awesome.
So I know we kind of covered this a little bit before. So if you're walking, imagine yourself walking up a big giant slope. Are you zigzagging back and forth like this? And how far down do you kind of go? Do you go like 100 yards and then zigzag back 100 yards? Or do you walk like maybe like here, it would maybe just be like a big giant hill and you would walk to one end of the hill and then zigzag back to the other end of the hill? What's kind of your way that you like to do it?
Now, I really love to say I have some super concise pattern that I use every time, and a lot of times it's just I kind of wander. You know, I'll try to stick to a zigzag, and then I'll see a deer trail, and then I'll take that deer trail, and it wanders me this way. And a lot of times, it's kind of stupid the way I do it. I just kind of roam, and I'd like to say I stick to a very specific plan. And if I have an area that I know well and I know there's sheds in there, then I'll force myself to stick to I might zigzag and, you know, jump 30, 40 yards every time, enough that I can kind of see where I've walked previously, because I don't want to zigzag 100 yards apart because, you know, there could be plenty of sheds in between each zigzag, but I'd like to make pretty narrow, you know, again, sometimes you might walk through an area that you walked through an hour beforehand, and looking at it from a different angle, you see something that you missed. So I don't know. I just like to always stay on sign. Sometimes zigzagging, you through doing that, you wander off of the deer sign, and I like to just always keep myself where the deer are and where that sign is.
Is sign super important to you? If you have a south facing slope and there's no sign on it, are you going to shed hunt it?
No. If I walk through there for 30 minutes and there's not a deer track and not any, you know, droppings or beds or anything that really piques my interest, I'm probably not going to waste my time there. You know, I'd rather walk back to the truck and hit up another spot that was going to be, you know, better off.
Let's talk a little bit too about spots. Do you ever have spots that you go back to and you're like, this is a spot I find sheds every year? Yeah.
It's sometimes those deer, if that spot consistently has the food and that exposure and the cover that they want in the winter, those bucks, they'll go to the same, they might migrate a mile or 2 miles, 3 miles every winter to get to that one spot that they like to be. And typically, if you find a bunch of sheds in a spot one winter, those bucks are going to be in there the next winter. So I think sometimes having a good shed spot is kind of like having a good hunting spot. It's just good year after year.
Yeah, I've always wondered if obviously they can pop off anytime, but I've always wondered if it was like, you know, people have this is my good stand, I'm gonna hunt. Didn't know if people had like a good shed hunting area. Maybe it was like a 100 by 100 yard, or, you know, maybe that's small, but just kind of like a core area to focus on. So yeah, that's interesting.
Yep.
So food sources, are there any kind of food sources that you like to focus on more than other food sources? And have there been ones that have been more productive than other ones?
Definitely. And again, this, you know, I'm talking for PA here, but this is true to pretty much wherever you are in the country. You kind of have to figure out what the best food source is for your given area. Now, again, I've shed hunted a lot of ag land too, and that's a whole different game. But personally, where I'm at, you know, kind of in the PA Wilds region, we don't have a lot of ag. And really where I'm at specifically, we don't have any oak trees either. Those deer are browse heavy creatures. They don't have any mast or any ag. So this time of year, it seems, and I found that this pretty consistently, is we have a lot of ferns here, and the deer love to dig up the bulbs, like the fern bulbs. That's one of the biggest things. If you find like an exposed ridge, like south-facing ridge that has a lot of ferns, you'll find a ton of deer sign in there, and that's where I find a ton of sheds. But, I mean, any kind of little, like in the clear cuts, you get the little saplings, little grassy patches. If you have a ridge that has a lot of oak trees or beech trees, you know, whatever the food source, the best food source is in that given area, that's going to be where those deer are hanging out and probably where they're going to shed their antlers.
So you said you've done a little bit of the shed hunting in ag areas. Yep. We have a lot of corn and bean fields here. What's a good way to kind of lock that down? Because obviously it's hard to walk a mile by a mile square cornfield, which is pretty common here. Is there any specific area, like maybe a corner or something? I would imagine you would target maybe a corner close to the woods that they're coming out, feeding in that corner and then going back to bedding, or they're probably not out in the middle, I guess.
Right. And again, it comes back to in the winter, they're not going to want to be making all kinds of crazy hauls to go get food. So that's going to be one of those situations where you're going to need to find the bedding. And a lot of times they're probably not going to go that far. You know, if there's a thicket or a little south-facing hump next to that cornfield that they're going to bed on, I would say whatever in that cornfield is closest to that is going to be, you know, probably where they're going to be feeding and where they're going to shed their antlers. So, I mean, I'm not an expert at ag deer, but most of the sheds that I found in cornfields and bean fields and hay fields and stuff, they're relatively close to the edge.
Yeah. Okay. What about weather when it comes to shed hunting? Can you kind of talk about how that plays a factor in, I guess, both them dropping it and you getting out and shed hunting? Maybe if you get 17 inches of snow.
Yeah, that's going to pretty much put an end to your shed hunt right there. But I think weather is kind of iffy to say about how it affects the drop, because I think that has more to do with their testosterone and how they are coming out of the rut, how healthy they are. That has more to do with the, you know, when they're going to drop. But in terms of actually going out and shed hunting, I like, you know, ask a lot of other shed hunters, cloudy days are the best days, because when the sun is out, everything has that glare to it. And you're never going to find a shed when the whole ground is shining with a glare. And especially, you know, a shed's white. You're not going to find a white shed with a glare on the ground. So obviously, you know, you're a working guy, a lot of us work or have school or whatever. You can't, you know, necessarily predict or pick the days you want to go. Right. But if you can get a cloudy day that, you know, it's overcast and there's not going to be a glare on the ground, that's going to be your best bet. Now, unfortunately, you know, a lot of the days you take what you get. If it is sunny, it's just a matter of you're going to have to just slow down and really pick the area apart better, because you might not see a shed that's 30 yards away. You might have to step on it to find it.
Something that just came to mind, a guy at work was telling me, asking me if I'd ever hunted mushrooms, which I didn't do it as a kid. I've been out like one time by myself, unsuccessful. But he was telling me about a guy that he knows that he went mushroom hunting with, that this guy is like a mushroom killer, picker, or whatever. He's super good at it. And he said a couple months prior to hunting mushrooms, he stares for a certain amount of days or whatever. He'll get on Google Images or whatever, pictures he's taken, and he'll look at pictures of mushrooms, and it almost builds up his eyes from all of that wait time. So he kind of starts to see it again and understand how to maybe pick them out when they're more camouflage. You ever do anything like that with sheds? Do you feel like you get better as shed season goes on? Like after you find one, you feel like you can find one easier?
Definitely. I mean, last year, once I found like 4 or 5 sheds, it just started to be like, once you kind of key in on what you're looking for, and you get some like positive feedback on it, it definitely helps. Now I'm trying something new this year, and so far this has seemed to kind of just mess me up and waste my time. But the last couple times I've been out, I've actually brought a shed along with me, and like every once in a while I'll just close my eyes and chuck it and then go try to find it to like train my eyes. Now, I've heard a lot of people say they do this and it really helps them, but for me, I've just threw it too far and then I couldn't figure out where I threw it, and I spent 45 minutes looking because I didn't want to lose my head that I brought. But I definitely
Did you ever lose one?
No, I haven't lost it. I would not walk out of there knowing that I threw one and I left it. But I think once you just find a couple, your eyes start to train for the curve of the beam and the tines, and you start to pick up on them better.
Yeah, that'd be really interesting if you threw one and then like you couldn't find it and another hunter found it and they're like, man, this shed looks like it's like 20 years old. How is it so pristine?
Right. I was thinking that, or like somebody going through like, oh man, I found the shed. I got to find the other side. I'd do it. I'm like, man, that other side is probably 80 miles away or something.
That's funny. Yeah. I feel like with anything, going in and deer hunting for the first time every year, it seems like you get everything together. You got the truck loaded up. You got all your gear where it needs to go, and you go in and it just like, sometimes you go in to hang a set and it just like turns into a shit show. It ends up taking an hour and a half and it seems like you can't find anything. But then as like October, you know, I start in September in Kentucky. It seems like October rolls around. It's like, I'm up in the tree in like 5 minutes. I guess it's kind of like the practice makes perfect thing. The more you do it, the more you see it, the more reps you do, you just kind of get better at it.
Definitely.
So is there anything, I guess there's probably a lot of things that you've learned shed hunting through the years, but is there anything that sticks out to you that's made you more of a efficient shed hunter?
I think just keying in on the food, because before I used to spend so much time, because I used to have, I've heard other people tell me this too, I used to have this notion that you have to shed hunt the thickest areas because that's where the deer are going to be walking through and they're going to get their antlers stuck on something, and then their antlers are going to rip off their head, and that's where the sheds are going to be. And I spent years shed hunting and crawling through the nastiest thickets and getting thorns and stickers and stuck in the bushes, and I never found anything. And now that I've focused on food, it's like I'm walking through wide open woods and picking up sheds left and right. And I think the biggest thing that I've learned is, you know, focus on that food and those places where the deer, you know, can just go out and bask in the sun and stay warm and eat and kind of just be lazy deer, because that's what they want to do nowadays, or in the wintertime. That's what they want to do.
That's funny. I do this podcast to try to help people learn stuff, and it just, for me just now, it just like stuck, because that's something like I found like 1 or 2 sheds in my entire life. It's not something that I find very often, and I'm always crawling through the thick, nasty, thinking that I got to get in there.
Yep.
And I just kind of just thought about this spot we walked by the other day, this big south facing slope that was nice and grassy and open that I've never actually walked up. So maybe that's where all the sheds are at, because I was in the bottom the other day crawling through all the nasty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're lazy, man. I mean, again, we think of deer of how they are in hunting season, and they're these brilliant, intelligent animals, which they are. But this time of year, they're tired, they're cold, they're hungry, and they're beat down, and they're going to be lazy.
So we talked a little bit about you dropping, you throwing that shed and somebody else maybe trying to find the other set, or the other side of it rather. How often is it that you find the other side, and how far apart are they usually? Are they usually within 100 yards? Now I know this is like a general thing or whatever. They can obviously be anywhere, but how often is it that you find both sides?
So I probably only ever found like 4 or 5 match sets in my life. And every time I found a match set, they have been within feet of each other.
Really?
Like, oh, there's a shed. Oh crap, there's the other side right next to it. I mean, I found 4 sets last spring, and all 4 sets were literally within 2 feet of each other.
Huh. That's pretty interesting.
And again, it depends on the deer too, because sometimes their antlers kind of wear away at different at a different speed. But
Yeah.
I think when they're ready to go, I think sometimes they might shake their head or get their, stick their antlers in the snow or in the bushes or whatever. And I think one will pop off, and then the jolt of them jumping from popping the one off, sometimes that just knocks the other one off.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes sense. Anybody that's deer hunted very often knows how skittish deer are. And
Yeah.
even, they'll scare themselves. You'll watch them in a stand and they'll step on a stick, or
Yep.
another deer will step on a stick and they jump like somebody shot at them or something.
Right.
So they're powerful. So I believe that's true. That's enough to knock one side off. Do you ever find the other shed like next to like a tree or something that you feel like they maybe bumped against, or is that never really?
Not necessarily. I've found some, and I've heard other people talk about this, that kind of because again in the winter when the sun's beating down and there's snow on the ground, that tree, because it's a dark bark, it'll like absorb the warmth. And the area like at the base of the trees, that'll be the first place that the snow melts, and like the grass will be sticking out there.
Oh, yeah.
And they'll go to the base of the trees to get, eat that grass that's sticking out of the snow, so they don't have to dig for it. And a lot of times you'll find sheds like right at the base of a tree. And who knows, maybe it is that they go to get that grass and they hit their antler on the tree, and that's when it comes off. Or, that's probably a pretty plausible reason. But
yeah, that's a very a useful tip, I think. I never really thought about the snow kind of melting off what they might be feeding on. You might want to focus on that. Yeah, that's very useful. So floodwater, ponds, rivers, anything like that, does that ever affect or help you find sheds? Maybe, and deer got to drink, obviously. So
right.
You ever focus on water sources or anything like that?
I particularly haven't. Now here in PA, we really don't get a lot of floods. I know out your way, you guys probably get way more.
Floodplain by the river.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't really get floods, so that doesn't really affect us. But they do have to get water. I haven't really keyed in. I did find that one of the match sets I found last year was right next to a creek. But I kind of think there was a real thick area, and I think they were feeding. It was like a mountain laurel, and they were in there feeding on the mountain laurel. So I think that's why the sheds were there. I don't really think there was any relation to the water. Now here where we're at in the woods, there's little puddles and spring trickles, and there's water everywhere. So our deer don't really have to key in on a specific water source. And I know other parts of the country, they might really have to if they don't have that, water all over the place. So that could be, at least for me, it's not, but I wouldn't count that out.
Yeah, there's a few properties that I hunt between Indiana and Kentucky that they flood quite often, and I'd really like to shed hunt them. But as you know, anything in water likes to float and move around, so it's really hard to kind of key in on a specific spot maybe the deer would be, because the antler might have floated a half a mile down once the waters came up and the river got to it and everything else. So it does make it tricky. So, you talked a little bit about you like collecting sheds. But I imagine, well, I know there's people out there that sell them, because I've seen like deer antler letter openers and deer antler pocket knives and what have you. So people, I guess, sell sheds. Do you know if that's a legal thing to do? And I guess maybe we'll break it down by inches. If you were imagined to sell an antler, what would you price it by? Like the inch or something? Or
I'm not really sure. I think character has a lot to do with it too. And I know I don't sell sheds, but I think a lot of guys out west, in the western states, I think where they can go out and glass up 50, 60 sheds in a day, I think they get into selling them. And there's a huge market for like dog chew toys and stuff. And I'm sure it's just however many, 8-inch chunks you can get off of an antler. But I actually follow an Instagram account. I forget which one it was, but the guy, he finds a ton of sheds and he sells them, like as sets. And he was selling like a big, like, I think it was like a 180-inch maybe match set. He was selling them for like $700.
Wow.
Now, I don't know if anyone's buying them, but like they were beautiful looking sheds, but he was like, I think he had another single shed. It wasn't a match set, but it was like a big meaty shed. And I think he was selling it for like $300 just for that one antler. Now, is anybody buying it? I don't really know.
That is insane.
Yeah. I mean, there's a market for them if you want to sell them. I mean, I like to collect them too much that I don't really want to sell them. Maybe someday if I have boxes full of them, I want to get rid of them. But I think, you know, there's people that make money off of it.
Yeah, I've got a couple of sheds, and it would be like it would be almost heartbreaking for me to like sell them and get rid of them. I just don't think I could do it. But maybe if you had hundreds or thousands, and maybe it's because I don't find very many. They're more like sentimental to me. But gosh, $700 for a set. That's pretty crazy. I know that there's like, I'll probably catch some flack for this. I don't know, but I know there's like rich guys and stuff, or maybe gals that have like these huge hunting cabins or something, and people like buy other people's taxidermy, like at a yard sale, or like I don't know, they buy it on eBay or something to like decorate their cabin.
Yeah,
I just don't ever see myself buying like somebody else's rack or mount to put in my house. So I can't imagine like buying a set of sheds for $700. I just feel like I wouldn't be able to be proud of them. Like I don't know the story, I don't know the hunt and all that stuff behind it. But like you said, maybe people are making like chandeliers or something out of them. I don't know. That's crazy. So hunting has a lot of ethics that come into it. Clean kills of the animal. A lot of ethics between, you know, us, like other hunters and stuff. Shed hunting, is there any ethics that come into shed hunting? Do you ever feel like you're on public ground? I know, but do you ever feel like somebody's maybe not being ethical, or maybe you're like, I'm not going to go over there, there's another guy over there shed hunting? Is there any kind of ethics that go along with that?
Yeah, I feel like there definitely could be. I mean, there's two things immediately that come to mind, because the first one I didn't talk about is like here in PA. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but they've reintroduced elk into Pennsylvania.
Oh, I was not.
No. Yeah, we have about, I think, like 1,300 elk now in PA, and we have a hunting season for them. And the other thing too is because, you know, you're only allowed to kill, however, very many few bulls a year. It's such a hard to draw tag. We have almost bigger bulls than anywhere else in the country. And, you know, it's not uncommon to find a 400-inch plus elk roaming around. So the elk sheds in PA, it is like a war zone. Like people will sit there and watch an elk for days, and as soon as its antler falls off, it's like 30 people running up to try to get that antler.
Really?
Yeah. And I personally haven't spent a lot of time elk shed hunting, but I've heard it gets pretty intense, and a lot of it, which is this pressure, has caused a lot of guys to trespass. And I've heard that there's a lot of issues with people trespassing here in PA because they know there's an elk on somebody's property, and they sneak on at night with spotlights and like basically poach sheds.
Wow.
And I know that's a big issue. And another thing, I guess with ethics, this plays into, and I never really considered this much before, but I guess it is something to keep in mind, is, you know, when you're having a really hard winter, those deer are, you know, struggling to get by day, and every calorie counts to them. And I think if you're having a really bad winter and you're going out chasing those, looking for sheds and kicking those deer all around, that can, you know, expend a lot of energy for those deer. And I've heard a lot of people talking about shed hunting pressure actually causing a lot of deer to die, because, you know, they'll be so, you know, hungry and tired and worn out through the winter, and then guys start roaming all through the woods and kicking the deer around, that they'll expend so much energy that they'll just collapse. And I've heard that, you know, especially out west more, where they get really nasty cold winters, that, you know, they're actually starting to ban shed hunting, you know, up until a certain point in the year. So I think it has to, you know, you kind of have to consider, you know, what impact are you making? Yeah, you're just walking around in the woods, you're not killing anything, but you have to consider your impact while you're out there, what your presence is doing to those animals.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of I guess I'll put in quote, big buck killers. They'll talk about going into their property maybe after season and kind of being like, this is like my free pass to kind of snoop around and not really screw with the deer. But now that you mentioned that, like bumping them and all that stuff too, I imagine if you went in there enough and bumped them looking for sheds, you could, one, kill them off. They don't have a whole lot of calories, but you could push them off to another property.
Yeah.
I've not really heard about that late season. Usually guys are like, oh, it doesn't matter, by September, October, they're going to be back to normal, but it's probably not the case.
I mean, I could say the other day I was out and it was, most of our snow's about gone now, but we still had a lot of snow left. And I didn't go out for a while afterwards because I'd bumped a deer and the thing would run 20 yards and look at me and stop, and then I'd keep going and it would run 20 yards and stop, and it wasn't behaving like a deer normally would. And it seemed like that deer just had no energy to run away from me. And I felt bad. And I stopped for like a little while afterwards just because I was like, I don't want to beat these deer down and like wear them out by chasing them all over the woods. I'd rather just wait a couple weeks and bother them when they have food and when they have some more energy.
Those post-season deer, they get like PTSD. They're all screwed up. They just like they need some rest and relaxation. They need some chill time.
Definitely.
Something that just popped in my head. I know it's illegal in Kentucky, and I'm not sure if it's illegal or not in Indiana, but have you ever seen the deer antler traps that people build?
Yeah.
They'll take like chicken wire or something and they'll put it in like a square or a circle, however they do it, and they like dump corn into it. Have you had any experience with that or seen any videos on that kind of stuff? How well you think that works?
I've seen some videos on it, and I've heard really mixed things because I have a couple, but I've never tried it, but I have a few friends that have done it, and I've had some people say like they never got anything, and then another buddy told me like, yeah, I put one of them in my yard and I had like 5 antlers in a week. So I think it depends on how you construct it and how you make it, and I also think it depends on the buck to doe ratio, because if you have 20 does come in and hoard that feeder and eat all the food before a buck can get there, then you're never going to get anything in it. But I haven't played around with it. I'm pretty sure in Pennsylvania it's illegal.
Yeah, I imagine it would have to be put out at a very specific time too, because something I would worry about. I worry about this sometimes on my set stands where you have your tow rope hanging down. I'm always real careful to like wrap it really tight because I'm always scared that like a buck's going to come up and sniff it and get like, you always see these deer get tangled in people's like tire swings and stuff. I'm always thinking I'm going to walk in and like this deer is going to like smell this rope and like entangled himself. What a nightmare that would be. But I imagine that it would have to be put out fairly late to make sure that you don't catch a deer that's maybe not ready to break off, because then you're going to end up just entrapping him in there, and that would be a nightmare.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because a buddy just told me back to the elk sheds that one of his uncles or friends or whatever it was, they had an elk like right about this time of year get stuck. It got its antlers stuck in their swing set and it popped both antlers off. They went out in the morning. There was 2 huge elk sheds stuck in their swing set.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
our elk are kind of urban.
Are they shed hunters?
Yeah, so I think they're pretty stoked about it.
That's like Christmas morning to them.
Yeah.
So you said you live in an apartment, and you got all these sheds. What do you do with all of them? You decorate your whole apartment with them? You got them hanging over your bed and sleeping on your pillow?
Yeah, I have
girlfriend get fed up with all that?
I have a couple on my desk here, and my I have like a TV stand, kind of like I don't know how to really describe it, like a little end table at my TV's on, and I have like 40 sheds all crammed on, it has like shelves on it, and I just have all my shed stuff in there. I have all my fresh sheds here at my parents' house back home. I have on top of my armoire, I have like probably 20 old chewed up ones up there. I just like sticking them around and looking at them, and every so often I'll pick some of them up and look at them and think about where I found them and what buck it was, and I don't know, I just think they're cool, man.
You ever mark them or anything? Date them or anything like that?
I don't, because I like keeping them natural. The one, I had this idea that I was going to date all of them. Like I was going to write on the base, like in Sharpie what date I found them. So there's like 2 of them that I did that. And then I was like, no, this looks stupid. Like, I don't want Sharpie on my antlers. So I stopped. I don't really do anything with them anymore.
And almost like it almost just taints it, ruins it, doesn't it? Yeah.
I wish I could take that Sharpie off, man.
Do you so you said you had a girlfriend. I'm sure you have friends and stuff that come over. You got these sheds all laying around. They ever talk shit, or they were like, what's the deal, man? Like, we don't get it.
No, most of my friends that I hang out with are also pretty into shed hunting and hunting, so they like them. And now my girlfriend doesn't hunt, but she's gotten like the craze too. Like, she actually just found a shed in her yard the other day, and she was like calling me all excited about it. So most of my friends think it's pretty cool.
Did she keep it, or she let you have it?
No, she kept it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want it, man. It's her shed.
Sounds like some competition is going to be building then.
It might be.
So I guess my last question would be, what's your number one advice maybe for somebody like me that hasn't found very many sheds, or maybe somebody that just wants to get started in it this year? Number one advice, or maybe a couple number one things to keep in mind.
I would say the biggest thing too is you're probably not going to find a lot right off the bat, and you can't get discouraged. You just have to keep grinding. As you know, you got to put some miles on your boots. It's going to take a lot of walking. You're going to get in good shape, and just get out there and grind and look for them, and focus on that. Focus on the food and that south-facing exposure where those deer can go hang out and be warm and be in the sun and out of the snow. And that's going to be the place where you're going to find them. And keep them. You know, you might have to find, 5, 6, 7 different areas that you want to go look in. You might not find sheds in all of them, but once you start figuring it out, it starts to get fun.
You just got to put in that boot work. Just got to keep at it. And
a lot of boot. I mean, last season I probably walked close to 200 miles just in like March.
Wow.
And it was, I had a lot of days of tired feet, but it's just that drive to keep going and looking after them. And some days you walk 10 miles and find nothing, and then other days you walk 2 miles and find 10. So it's just depends on the day.
Thrill of the hunt.
Yep, that's it, man.
All right. So can you tell everybody where to find you on social media? Maybe they have questions. Maybe you can answer some stuff for them, or maybe somebody's around you. They want to get together and hunt or something. I don't know.
Definitely, man. Yeah, I pretty much only use Instagram. My Instagram's at Nate in the Field. Feel free to message me or do anything. That's one of my favorite things about social media is I love to like talk to people and meet new people and spit ideas back and forth about hunting and fishing and stuff like that. So yeah.
Yeah, cool. That's how we learn. Social media is a great tool. It can be bad too, but
right.
It's a great tool for us to kind of collaborate, and you can definitely learn a lot from it for sure.
Totally.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time and coming on and everything, and I'll catch up with you, man.
Thanks, man.
Yep, I appreciate it. I'll see you.
Yeah, see ya.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Hunt the Wild podcast. If you enjoyed the show and it's brought you some sort of value, I'd love if you could give me a rating and a review. Just a few seconds of your time can help me better understand the type of content you all enjoy, and it would mean the world to me to hear from all of you.